Today is the 17th Sunday of the year. Our Gospel is taken from Luke chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. In the Gospel, we hear Jesus teach the disciples how to pray, and we get the basic words of the prayer we call the Our Father. He also instructs them to seek in prayer, and they will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. Ask, and you will receive. Now, as with all the gospel texts we read on Sundays, we're very familiar with them, and familiarity can breed contempt. The contempt can shut us off to the depths of the gospel, and no more so than when those depths frighten us. I think that is the case in today's gospel. How many of us have sought and not found, asked and not received, knocked on the door and the door wasn't open, or so it seemed? That's our experience of the silence of God. In the face of our need, we expect God to act, and it seems so often God does not act, does not answer, does not speak a word of love or care. The first thing we need to say about prayer is that we are in God's territory. Prayer is an entry into the silence of God, a territory that we don't understand. We must surrender to God. Recall Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 14. The great I Am is revealed to Moses. The only promise is I'll be with you. There's no promise I'll sort everything out. You can expect things according to human logic to unfold. No. I'll be with you. I'll be there as who I am. Shall I be there? This I Am set fire to the bush. This I Am said to Moses, take off your shoes. You're on sacred ground. In prayer, we must take off our shoes. Let go of our expectations, for we are on sacred ground. We are on God's ground. Now, there's a story from a Holocaust survivor that is helpful in this regard, coming to terms with the silence of God, because nowhere was the silence of God more resounding than during the Holocaust. Elie Wiesel was a young boy in Romania when the Nazis came. All of his family was annihilated. He was the only survivor. He describes one of the incidents in the camp, in one of the camps, in which a little boy was executed by hanging. Because he was small, because he had suffered from malnutrition, the hanging was slow and agonizing. And the prisoners were made to walk around and look him in the face. Elie Wiesel recalls an old man crying out behind him, "Where is God now?" Elie Wiesel heard a voice inside himself say, "There is God, hanging on the gallows." Many thought at that point Elie Wiesel became an atheist. In other words, you can't possibly think of a God, especially a God of love, a God who has chosen you, us, and this terrible, horrific thing to happen. Elie Wiesel, in his memoirs much later, describes a conversation he had with his Talmudist master, Rabbi Lieberman. I'd like to quote to you from that, because it is very helpful. My Talmudist master, Rabbi Saul Lieberman, has pointed out another way to look at this. One can and must love God. One can challenge him and even be angry at him. But one must also pity him. Do you know which of all the characters in the Bible is most tragic? He asked. It is God. Blessed be his name. God whose creatures so often disappoint and betray him. Whelan goes on, perhaps God shed more tears in the time of Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz. And one may therefore invoke his name not only with indignation, but with sadness and compassion. We should not assume that what is best we know, or assume that what God's love should do or will do, we also know. Elie Wiesel's indignation with sadness and compassion seems right to me. We're on God's territory here. A belief that can allow us to be indignant with God can paradoxically grow in the face of the silence of God. The only option is not to walk away. There is an option to stay, to keep turning up, to refuse to go away, to be angry, to be frustrated, and to tell God this. Recall Jesus' cry on the cross. Matthew's gospel puts on the lips of Jesus Psalm 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? Perhaps the most eloquent instance of the silence of God. And the Psalms are actually redolent with this theme. The book of Job is a wonderful example of it. I pray because Jesus asked us to pray. Each night, in fact, I pray for family and friends, myself, and those who've asked my prayers, and those for whom I've promised to pray. Not with any particular expectation, but because that's what Jesus asked. Praying, this kind of prayer of petition particularly, is part of being a disciple. I don't think I have any option. Every day I must dare to say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.